Hi, and welcome back to the Save It for Parts channel. Normally on this channel we're building DIY projects out of junk, but I do occasionally buy new gadgets, and this is one of them. The Flipper Zero here, if you're not familiar with it, is a hacking tool or security tool disguised as an electronic pet. Or alternatively, an electronic pet disguised as a hacking tool. This is kind of a cool thing that I've been looking at for a while, and I finally bit the bullet and bought one. Now, this is not a sponsored review. I bought this thing myself, and I just want to play around with this, see what it does, see what I can do with it, and see if there are ways I can integrate this into some of my other projects. Sticker, quick start guide, USB cable, and our little flipper unit. Again, to explain a little more about what this does for those who have not heard of one before, it's kind of a little security testing device, penetration testing, radio hacking. It has some built-in radio stuff where it can record and play back radio signals. So theoretically, you can use it to spoof things like security remotes, RFID cards, access control cards. Now, I have some hardware that can do that sort of thing already, but it's mostly in pieces, requires more programming, requires more electronic stuff. So this little guy supposedly makes all that stuff simple, easy, and fun, because it's kind of like a video game. I have some mixed feelings on turning hacking tools into a toy like this. On one hand, it makes everybody potentially a hacker, from kids to casual criminals to just anyone who can pick up one of these devices and start spoofing garage door remotes, spoofing security keychains, things like that. On the other hand, I think it's kind of a good idea to get the awareness out of how insecure some of your daily stuff is. If anybody can just copy your car remote with a device like this, well, criminals are going to be able to copy your car remote with a Raspberry Pi and a few extra dollars in hardware. So this thing can raise awareness of common security vulnerabilities and get some lazy tech companies to increase their security. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, that being said, I don't plan on doing anything illegal with this. I'm going to be hacking, quote unquote, my own stuff and playing around with some of my own equipment around the house. We've got our little electronic pet dolphin here, so this is reminiscent of those little Tamagotchi things from the 90s. Okay, so we need to add an SD card here, and that saves all of the data that this works with. Now it wants to be updated. Now, with a lot of consumer electronics, I hesitate to update firmware because with consumer level stuff, new updates tend to make everything worse for the end user and better for the anonymous mega corporation that made it. For example, those Amazon Kindle tablets, updating those was a huge mistake. I lost the ability to hack and root those once I updated it. It made them much less interesting. But with something like this, where it's kind of an independent developer and updates are coming pretty regularly, they should include some interesting stuff that's actually useful to me as a user. So I am going to go online and update the firmware on this. So I'm going to use the Flipper Zero mobile app to update over Bluetooth. So far that is not working. I'm always a little suspicious of Bluetooth. It never seems to really work very well. So let's see what this thing can do. We've got our settings screen. Can go ahead and set this to freedom units. I got the classic Snake game. Looks like we've got a little music player. Pretty basic stuff. I think we can install more apps on here if we want. We've got this sub-gigahertz radio, kind of a software-defined radio built into the unit. Play with that in a minute. Got RFID stuff, NFC card, infrared. GPIO are these pins here. You can add on accessory modules. I button is probably some Apple nonsense. I've heard of bad USB, but I don't really know what it is. 2FA or U2F, that's for authenticating, like when you log into Google and it wants you to check on your phone. Apparently you can use this little guy instead. First off, let's try something simple here. Apparently you can read pet microchips with this thing. So I think I need to go to RFID, go to Extra Actions, and then we want to read ASK. Now, Donnie has a microchip. Personally, I think every dog and cat should have a microchip in case they get loose. We have definitely found some pets owners that way, and we've definitely found some lost animals that didn't have a chip, and it was much, much harder to get them back to their people. If your dog or cat doesn't have a microchip, please get one. Anyway, we're going to see if we can read Donnie's chip here. Hey, yeah, good kitty. It says don't move the card, but Donnie here wants to move around a lot. All right, we did get the chip number. I'm going to fuzz that out so nobody steals Donnie's identity. The flipper here is pretty low power, pretty low range radio transceiver, so you have to hold it basically right up against the cat, right where you know that chip is to get a reading. But we did eventually get it. Now, is the flipper a cost-effective way of reading microchips and identifying stray animals? Not necessarily. I've got this scanner, which works a lot better and is half the price. So if you get a lot of stray animals in your yard and you're trying to get them back home, I'd actually recommend getting one of these guys instead of the flipper. But of course, the flipper does a lot of other stuff too. I went ahead and saved that, which not only lets me mess with it later, but also gives our little pet dolphin here some experience points. So if you're using this like a game, that helps you level up. Now, I saw on Peter Fairley's channel that you can supposedly write information back to a pet microchip. I'm not going to be trying that on the cats because I don't want to overwrite their actual microchip that's in there. So next up, we've got the sub-gigahertz radio menu. And we can do a few things here. We can read raw, save. Now, I think to some extent when you go to read, you have to put in what frequency you're looking at. So you kind of have to know what you're trying to read. Although, we can also go to the frequency analyzer, and that shows transmissions on nearby frequencies. So it's seeing something in the room here transmitting on these frequency ranges. I don't know what these are. These could be cell phone frequencies. These could be spurious emissions from my computer or other equipment. Not really sure exactly. And the flipper knows a bunch of pretty standard radio protocols for garage doors, security remotes, various things like that. So we're going to go ahead and go back, go to scanning. And we're just going to try locking my car here. So far, we're not picking anything up. All right, I was assuming 433 megahertz since it's a foreign car, but in the US and North America, 315 megahertz is more common. So let's try that. We got a little signal spike there, but I don't know if we've actually recorded anything. I've played around a little bit more, and I've turned on the beep tone, so when I click this, we can actually hear it beep. But it's still not picking anything up. So I think that means it's not using a known radio protocol on here. So instead, I think we can go to reading a raw file, and we want to change our frequency to 315. Got AM modulation, keep our sound on. I don't know what RSSI is, but let's go ahead and try this. We're recording. Stop. So now we have a raw recording of that radio file. Let's see what happens if we send this back to my car. Okay, nothing worked. It did not lock the car. Okay, let's try something else. We've got our garage door opener here. So if we go to read and we config, I think garage door openers are around 390 megahertz. And we're going to go ahead and turn the sound on. Well, that's kind of a noisy frequency, but let's see if this does anything. Alright, well it picked it up and it recognized it as a Security Plus remote. And if I go in there, there's all kinds of serial numbers and whatnot for that. I'm going to turn the sound off because that's a little annoying. Now I notice it doesn't let me save or replay this, and apparently that's a feature. Maybe the government made them add that, so you can't just casually replay this and open people's garage doors. So I've noticed this center button doesn't work reliably in the raw recording mode. I have to kind of push it a few times to get it to start recording and then push it a few times to get it to stop. Kind of annoying. I don't know if that's a software issue or the button itself. Alright, we've recorded our remote code and this does let me save. Let's see if we can replay that and open the garage. Ah, it does not want me to transmit on this frequency in this region. So again, this is marketed as a hacking tool, but it sure is restricted for a lot of things. So far, I'm a little disappointed in the flipper. I haven't been able to hack my car or my garage, so those were kind of two of the most common things that I thought this could do, but let's try some other stuff. Let's try infrared. That seems pretty straightforward. I've got a projector. Let's try that. So far, that is not working either. All right, let's see if we can learn the projector's legitimate remote and then emulate it. All right, the flipper knows that's an NEC, so we've recorded the on and off buttons because for some inexplicable reason, NEC projectors have to have a separate on and off button. The on button is red and the off button is green, which seems completely backwards to me, but whatever. Anyway, let's replay that power on button. And that worked. Between this and reading the cat's microchip, I've only gotten about 50% of the things on the flipper to actually function. So we don't necessarily need the flipper to do a lot of this stuff, and I could probably do replay attacks on the garage door and the car using other equipment, like my Raspberry Pi quarter here. But as I said, that would take a lot more stuff, like this giant box of random electronics that I am far too lazy and busy to put together into anything meaningful. Now, I have had a project for the Raspberry Pi to read RFID cards, remote access door key cards, and since the flipper can supposedly do that, let's try that next. I had a little USB RFID reader that I was trying to play around with here. We've got an RFID card, a fob, and another little device that was supposed to go on my Raspberry Pi quarter that's yet another RFID reader. I think we can play around with the card and the fob though. All right, let's try reading our little fob. It doesn't know what this is, so it's trying ASK and PSK. So there are a couple types of these fobs. Some of them are 13.5 megahertz, and some are the 125 megahertz that the flipper's trying to read. So I think this other one might be 125. Let's go ahead and try that. All right, we were able to read that, and we've got a code from it. Now apparently Flipper doesn't consider this to be a security hazard, so it won't let you open your neighbor's garage door, but it will let you copy security codes for your office all day. Okay, I think the 13.56 megahertz key fob might actually be NFC, so we're going to try that one. All right, and that seems to be reading, and that has all kinds of keys saved on it, so it looks like we've gotten 32 different keys off of that one fob. That's a pretty appropriate auto-generated name for an access control key fob. Now, I don't have a door around my house that uses one of these cards, but I was able to borrow this little card fob reader writer device. Yeah, so again, you don't necessarily need the flipper when there are other gadgets out there you can buy for special purposes, although this one tells you not to do anything illegal with it. Yeah, okay. Now, this identifies cards and fobs as these different types. We've got
125 kilohertz.
Yeah, we've got the 125 kilohertz, which I think was this one.
Read success. Card number is 5200.
All right, yep, that first one was 5200. So this gadget is supposed to be able to write data to one of these cards or fobs.
1337.
Let's see if we can get it to write this out.
Write success.
So let's see if Flipper sees that on here. All right, 1337, that worked. Now, let's say we want to clone this fob, but we don't like the fob because it doesn't read very well at our office's front door. But we've gotten a hold of a blank 125 kilohertz card. Let's write that fob onto the card and then see what our semi-legitimate card reader says it is.
Read success. Card number is 1337.
And there we go, we've just cloned an access card. Now, what if we don't have a blank card around and we just want to use the flipper as the access card? So we've pulled up one of our 125 kilohertz save files. We're going to go ahead and emulate that. And then we're going to hold this to the back of our other reader.
Read success.
All right.
Number is 5200.
All right, so we've just convinced this reader that the flipper is actually one of these cards. And I think we can do the same with NFC. If we go to Detect Reader, well, this got something off the flipper. I'm not actually sure what I was trying to send it, but yeah, it definitely acted like a card. It looks like we can also manually add card information. I guess it's kind of cool. I don't know hex code, but you could probably pass secret messages this way and encode some kind of arbitrary message onto your card. There are a variety of Flipper apps on the phone app for Flipper, and you can install those onto the device. And somebody always asks, will it play Doom? Yes, it will. I've got this IR scope program, which I think will let me look at raw infrared signals. Yeah, not sure if that's useful for anything, but it looks neat. Likewise, I've got this spectrum analyzer for the radio module. Although I don't know how accurate this little spectrum analyzer is, because when I try my Walmart FRS radio here, it claims to be on 410 megahertz when this thing is supposed to be like in 460 to 470 megahertz. If I do want to find the frequency of something, like our little cheap FRS radio here, I've got this other gadget that's supposed to just tell me the frequency of the strongest nearby signal. Yeah, 462 something. So again, the single-purpose gadget works a lot better than the flipper for specific uses. I added a couple other utilities, like this little guy will tell me if I'm talking to an NFC or RFID reader. Got a password generator so you can make secure passwords, although most browsers include that now. We've got this converter so I can go from freedom units to metric and whatnot. And just because I remember the old days of ham phone patches and radio telephones, I had to get a DTMF thing. I know the blue box isn't really a thing anymore, but I'm still amused by them. Now we can also use this over USB or apparently Bluetooth as a presentation remote, a mouse, or even a little keyboard. Not the most effective keyboard, but if it's all you have and you have an exposed USB or Bluetooth connection on some device you own that's completely legal, you can send it arbitrary keyboard or mouse commands. For example, I suddenly have a Bluetooth mouse controller on my phone. It's really slow, but it works. I can actually control the phone from the flipper here. Alright, I tried to install some other stuff, but the Flipper app on my phone keeps crashing, so I might have to reboot some things. So far I have mixed feelings on the Flipper. Again, this wasn't supposed to really be a review. I just wanted to see, what does this thing do? Can I use it in some of my projects? And I don't know if I've really figured out a project that this is useful for, other than when I get around to implementing some NFC and RFID stuff on my Raspberry Pi. This might be a good way to double check my work and see how that's going. But it seems like if you want the flipper for any one specific use, such as RFID reading, NFC reading, infrared, radio spectrum analyzing, you're really better off buying a device specifically for that use. Yes, this is a multi-tool. It does a whole bunch of functions poorly. So far, it doesn't really seem to do any of its functions very well, or not nearly as well as a single-use specific device. It's kind of a toy. It's fun, I think, but I have mixed feelings on it. I haven't really found a good killer use for this thing. I won't say I regret buying it. It's still cool to play with, and it's definitely a good way to get started on some of these technologies, to learn at least a little bit more about some of these things. But if you want to go farther than a toy with any one of these specific purposes, you probably need to buy some more equipment, get some more software and hardware, get something other than the flipper. It's a good intro to all this stuff, but if you want to go more than an intro, you're going to need more than this. If anyone out there has some good suggestions for this, specifically relating to my channel, things I could use this for with radio gear, satellite gear, old computers, old technology, I'd love to hear about it, because otherwise this is going to go in a box in the basement and my little pet dolphin here is going to waste away of boredom. Yeah, maybe I could do some kind of GPIO stuff with these expansion pins. I could put some of my Raspberry Pi sensors on there. Or, I don't know, do some other stuff with it. Really looking for suggestions, though, so throw them in the comments. Tell me what I can do with this thing, and maybe you'll see it on a future video. That's all we've got for this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.